What's going on, guys? Today we're back on another video, and this one's going to be a little simple. It's just going to be a quick disassembly and assembly of EMG / AW Custom Pit Viper, the JW4. I picked this up at a Boneyard sale, so it just had a broken magazine, so I just got a new magazine, same exact one that it comes with. So let's just get right into it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is obviously remove the slide. When it comes to taking apart the gun, it's pretty straightforward for Hi-Capas. I think I'll split it in two different sections where we do the slide disassembly first and then the lower frame, and then we'll get into the magazine. So let's start off with the slide first. So starting with the slide, you're going to need some tools. I have some MIP hex drivers here. You're going to want to start off by removing the set screw that holds the two-piece spring guide in. Now, I will say the two-piece spring guide is kind of notorious for breaking at that set screw point, so I would recommend upgrading to a one-piece. I know RA Tech makes a one-piece spring guide rod for 5.4 Hi-Capas, specifically the AW custom models. Then you're going to want to remove the spring guide plug. This is made out of polymer or plastic. If you're using CO2 magazines with this gun, I would recommend upgrading this as well. I'm not 100% sure on what part fits or is compatible for this due to the angled cut on the front so that it matches the compensator on the gun. I would maybe try using like a 5.1, like an Airsoft Master or something like that, metal piece that should be compatible. Now from there, you should be able to slide the whole outer barrel unit on. Now the outer barrel unit is attached to the hop up and the inner barrel. That's removable like this. So those are the three pieces separated. Now I'm pretty sure a lot of people go online and try to figure out how to remove the orange tip. The orange tip is pretty easy to remove. You should just be able to thread it off, but obviously it's going to be glued on, so you're going to want to apply a little bit of heat. It looks like the compensator is all one piece of the barrel. So unfortunately the compensator cannot be removed. So we'll set that aside for right now. Now to further tear down the slide, you are going to need to remove the rear sight here. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me get a smaller tool. So I tried using this thicker cut flathead, but you're going to need a thinner one. This screw is pretty thin. So when you remove this screw on top of the rear sight, you're going to want to be careful because it is under spring tension. So you just want to make sure you hold it down so it doesn't fly out and you lose the small spring that's inside. Then using a Phillips, remove the small screw inside. Now this small screw is important because it is holding the, it is one of the points that is holding the blowback unit housing into the gun. So once you remove this small screw, you could go ahead and use a very small punch and punch out this little pin, and that will remove this rear sight altogether. Now to continue taking out the blowback unit housing, you are going to want to remove this fake, I'm just gonna assume it's like a fake firing pin. So you're going to want to use a somewhat thick screwdriver to get in there. So it's going to be slotted on both ends, and it should just fall right out. There is a small spring on the inside that gives this pin some sort of spring feeling to it. So you're just going to want to make sure you do not lose that spring. And now normally I just kind of like shaking the blowback unit housing out. And that is how you disassemble the slide or the blowback unit housing from the slide. Now you're going to want to make sure to be careful as well, because there is a small nozzle return spring. It's just sitting loosely in there. It's not held on by hooks or anything, so you're going to want to be careful to make sure you don't lose that when you pull it out. So set that aside. Now with that removed, you can go ahead and pull the nozzle out. When you pull the nozzle out, you're going to hit a certain point where it cannot go further. It's due to the little piece that's molded on the nozzle hitting the actual housing. So when you get to that, you're going to want to teeter it from the bottom out. Now this is the nozzle. It's a regular AW custom Hi-Capa nozzle. I believe the HX series of nozzles work for this gun, and honestly I'm not too sure on compatible aftermarket parts. I know some people like using the Airsoft Masterpiece housings and nozzles, but there are two different versions of that. There's one that has a plunger style main seal, and there's one that has an O-ring style main seal. This one has the plunger style, so I would just recommend using the plunger style one, just to keep it consistent. Also two, Angel Custom makes a AW Custom Hi-Capa upgrade set for that could be compatible in this gun. So and that's keeping the same housing but using a better seal, or a better plunger seal, and then you get an upgraded nozzle that goes along with it. So to remove the seal, you could just use a flathead and pull it off like that, and it is just held in by a screw, a Phillips head screw. And then you can remove the middle section as well by getting a Phillips, taking that out, and then this should slide off. So if this ever breaks, or your seal ever goes bad, or the screw strips out, that's how you can remove this. And it is slotted, so when you put it back in, it will just fall right back in place. You might need to use a little pick or a flathead to seat it properly, and then you can use your screwdriver to thread that back on. Now you don't want to do it, it's going to thread on all the way, and there's going to be a little gap in between, so that when you do apply the main seal back on, it does just click right into place. Now to put the nozzle back on, you're going to want to reverse the reverse the removal. So just teeter it back and slide it back on. Now we'll go ahead and get into the hop-up unit itself. But first, let me just assemble this slide back together, and we'll show you how to do that right now. Alright, so to continue the installation of the blowback unit housing and nozzle back into the slide, you are going to want to make sure you put the nozzle return spring back in its slot right here. It's got a long channel, and it needs to be on the side that has the little block on the nozzle itself. Sometimes Hi-Capas have them on both sides. Luckily, this one only has it on one. So you're going to want to just top from bottom up, slide it in place, and it should just kind of fall back in place. You could also just confirm that the spring is good by just hold the blowback unit housing in with one hand, and then pulling the nozzle forward, and it should just snap back in place. Now I normally just hold it in by hand from the bottom, and then just put the small screw on top, since that should be enough just to hold it in place for now. It's a lot easier too than having to try to thread in this rear piece. This rear piece is kind of a pain to install and remove because it is under spring tension. So, and you kind of need the right size tool for this as well. I'm just using this number 3 Klein flathead screwdriver. It seems to be working so far, but you can use better tools, and you want to make sure it's snug and not super tight. So that's how you do that. And then you want to put the little spring back in its little slot. You can drop it back down, and it's going to be under spring tension again, so you're going to want to hold it down, and then using a thin walled flathead. Screw that back in place. This also does give you your like windage and stuff like that, so you can use this screw to adjust the windage. We'll put that aside for now. So to get into the hop-up unit, to remove the hop-up unit, you're going to want to remove these, or to open it up, you're going to want to remove these two small screws. So just using a small Phillips head, just remove these two. Some issues I have seen before are basically where, you know, your hop-up is centered. Your barrel should be centered by the hop-up unit. It has small blocks, so I'll show you when we open it up. Now, sometimes what happens is the inner barrel gets rotated a certain rotation left or right. And what that happens is it misaligns the bucking from making full flat contact. Pretend this is the bucking. It won't make full flat contact with the BB, and sometimes you'll get BBs that fly to the left or fly to the right. And in order for you to adjust that, you're going to have to remove the hop-up unit from the gun and verify that the inner barrel is actually centered. So when you take this side off, you should be able to just pull this out. Now this little arm right here is the adjustment arm. It sits in this channel. Let me see if I can get a better shot of that. It sits in the channel on the adjustment wheel, and when you adjust it, it either releases tension or adds tension. So when you're adding tension, it's giving it more hop. When you're releasing it, you're turning it off. Now, these do last quite a while. It depends on the manufacturer. There are aftermarket replacements that are better, but I've seen these snap, but I haven't seen them happen in AW custom guns. So you can remove the wheel as well. The wheel is just a small piece of plastic, so it might wear down after a while, especially if it's sharp metal rubbing against it, if you're adjusting the hop-up a lot. So we'll set this to the side. Now, to get a better look at the inside of the hop-up unit, it's just your standard kind of like Hi-Capa hop-up unit. There are two notches. Get a good shot. There's two notches right there and right there. Those blocks lock into the notches on the inner barrel, and that's what locks it in place. Now, this is a TM style bucking and inner barrel, so you could upgrade these to, you know, more durable and tighter bore barrels and stiffer buckings depending on the feet per second you're wanting to achieve and stuff like that. So basically to reinstall it is just the reverse of the disassembly. So the bucking has a little notch, and it's only on one side, and that's going to be on the side that this little hop-up unit has. So you're going to want to make sure that's sitting in place, and then you also want to make sure the inner barrel is locked in place as well. You're going to want to install the adjustment wheel with the adjustment channel facing up, and then you're going to want to install the adjustment arm where the little notch on this end is sitting in the channel, and it's sitting up on top of the bucking. There's a little window for it as well. You want to make sure that sits flat and in the channel. Then from there, you re-sandwich it together. And sometimes you have to rotate this to make sure it locks in. You can pull on it too, just to make sure it's also locked in. And then from there, you can hear it snap in place. And then it's just, you know, sandwiching it together. Then you're going to want to adjust you're going to want to install your two screws back. Now make sure, you know, for all airsoft products, honestly, you don't over torque screws, because this metal is not the strongest. So just up snug is good. You know, you don't need to, like, there's no torque value or a certain pound foot that it needs to go to. And that's how you reinstall the hop-up unit. So let's just keep going. Where we reinstall this back, you just slide that in place. Get your slide. You slide it through the front, just like that, and then you want your barrel to match up with your nozzle. It's going to sit pretty snug like that. You can also tell because the compensator on the slide is perfectly flush with the slide itself. Then you're going to want to install your plug. It should just slide in place. And then to reinstall your spring, you want to put this part forward. Got to compress the spring. While using your other hand, you slide this forward, and it should just kind of snap into place. And then from there, it should just hold itself in place. You're going to want to find a gap in the spring. Load up the hex key onto your hex driver. And then from there, just kind of find that gap. Thread it in place, snug, not tight. And that's how you disassemble and reassemble the slide of a JW4. Alright, so now let's move on to the lower frame. I always like starting by removing this extended magazine release. It's just going to unthread from the main magazine release. Now to remove the magazine release, you're going to need a small flathead. You push in, twist. Let's see if I got that. You're supposed to push in and twist. That's going to unlock a little tab that's spring loaded. You can slide that out. And then normally I just like reattaching the extended button because it's obviously going to get lost. Go ahead and drop the hammer. So to remove the parts down here, you're going to want to remove this pin. So I have a little hammer, and I honestly use one of my hex drivers. You just punch that out. I don't recommend using a hex driver. I'd recommend using a actual punch or a nylon punch, but don't have those right now. Set that aside. Now this should just fall right out of place. So it should just fall right out. Now this right here is the hammer. Inside this plate is the hammer spring. So you're going to want to slide that down, and that's going to have a spring inside of it. It's going to have a detent. So in order for you to remove the spring, or if something happens with the spring, you got to remove that detent, replace the spring. Now to remove the beaver tail, or first let's take out the leaf spring. So this is going to be the spring that hits all the sears. It's going to have a certain position for it. So we'll go ahead and set that to the side. Then you're going to want to pull these up, and this should just pop right out. Now sometimes it might get a little stuck. Now you might have to just pull it from the back, and you want to do it slowly. And you want to do it slowly because in this channel right here is a spring with 2 detents. We'll go ahead and take those out. A spring with 2 detents. Now these are kind of hard to find, so you're going to want to make sure you save those, don't lose those. And then the right side safety should just fall right out. Now when you remove that, the beaver tail itself should be able to come right out. Sometimes the hammer gets in the way, so that should just come right out like that. Just slides right out. Now a Hi-Capa has a lower frame which is mostly polymer, and it's this section right here. So in order for you to pull this out completely, you're going to have to remove these hex keys right here, these hex screws right here. And that's going to be a 3mm. They're small little screws that hold the metal frame into the plastic frame, or more like internal frame into the plastic frame. Oh, and then also forgot, there's a small Phillips up front right here. And then from there, it just separates like this. So this is the metal, like, internal frame. This is where the slides onto. It's all going to be one piece. It's metal. We'll set that aside for right now. Now the polymer lower frame, this is where the trigger's at. So if you do ever want to get an aftermarket trigger or something like that, you're going to have to go through this process, and this should just slide right out. It's held on by a little roll pin that's in the front right there. I'm just going to go ahead and slide it back in just to be safe, to make sure don't lose that. Set that aside. Now, the more complicated part. On this side, if you're looking at the gun, you know, shooting orientation, on the left side, there's going to be a small screw right here. When you remove this small screw, it's going to allow you to take this plate off. This whole piece should come up just like that. And that's going to allow you to get into your hammer. Remove the hammer. Your hammer sear. This is what holds it from shooting and holds it back. And then this is your disconnect. So you're going to want to put that to the side. And this is going to be all one piece, so you don't need to disassemble it any further. You could take apart this side, but using this small screw, but it's not necessary. Now, on the side that was removed is going to have your valve knocker. So this is going to be the little piece that hits the back of the magazine. The magazine is going to sit in the gun kind of like that, where it's flat. And then this piece is going to get pushed forward and release gas to shoot the gun. And then when the slide reciprocates, it's going to hit this piece to, it's going to lower it, and it's going to release this valve to reset, and that's going to shut off the gas to the gun. I'm not going to get into removing this because it's under spring tension and it's honestly kind of a pain. But, you know, this piece hardly fails, so we're not going to worry about that. So that's pretty much the complete disassembly of the lower frame. If you ever come across any disconnect issues or hammer issues, or, you know, your hammer might not be locking back or the safety's not working, definitely want to look into some of these sears. The leaf spring is a big component to this. It sits on these sears as well, so if this leaf spring isn't sitting on the sears correctly, it's going to cause, you know, issues where the hammer just won't lock back. You might fire and it might go full auto, and that's because the disconnect isn't working. Small issues like that. So we'll go back into the assembly of all these items right now. So to reassemble, we're just going to drop these sears back in place. So you're going to want to put the disconnect, the cutoff disconnect first. There's going to be a small little hole where the hammer's sear is going to fall in. Then the hammer should just drop right into place, just like that. You want this bar to be facing down. Then you're going to want to slide the plate back on. You might need to finagle the hammer a little bit, and it's going to sit flat. Then getting that screw that you removed, screwing it back in. Remember, snug, not tight. You could apply a little Loctite to it if you can, but I'm not going to. So sometimes you have to jiggle it to get the hammer to go back up. So then now you're going to want to put the lower frame on, just like that, using the 3mm hex driver. Then from here, I would put, can't forget the front screw. Then from here, you're going to want to slide this piece in. Now it's going to be thicker on one end. You're going to want the thick part facing away from the front of the gun. That should drop in. You can see it right here. Then you drop the spring in, and then you drop the second half in. It's going to be under tension, so I recommend using a small, putting this in first. Or, sorry, I'm skipping a step. You're going to want to put the beaver tail in. That's going to be held in by the safety bars. So once you have this into a certain point, you're going to want to use a small flat pick or something. And you're going to want to, or you know what's a better idea? You can use an X-Acto blade because it's thin enough to get in there. And then once it's seated properly, or at least attempted to be seated properly, it should just snap into place. It does require some tedious finagling here. Okay. Once you push this down, it should just click right in. Then you can click the other side in. Should just slide in. Then when you do that, it should just follow the same on both sides. Now to put the leaf spring in, you want to make sure that this section has a hook on it. It's going to slot into right here. You might need to hold this out of the way. It's kind of a tight fit, but should be able to fall right in right there. There we go. Now it's going to hit the sears on the inside. You can see the forks hitting, and you just drop this down. You want to make sure that your bar is in between the beaver tail, this sitting flat. Then using this piece, slide it back into place. Once you slide it back into place, it should be under tension. Then you're going to want to get your magwell, put the pin back in. There you go. Make sure it works. A lot of times too, I like to hold the trigger, pull the hammer back. If you release, and if it doesn't lock back, and if you can hear a reset, then it's good to go. And then go ahead and reinstall your extended magazine release. Reattach that. Then you can go ahead and get your slide. Slide it back on. Put your slide catch. That's your fully assembled JW4.